Hey everybody, it's me, Trey Holiday, and right now, right here in the Washington History Museum, I have the pleasure of speaking to Jennifer and Gwen. What's up, Jennifer?
Nothing. We're just really excited to be talking to you, sitting here in the Green Book.
Absolutely. Tell us who you are and what you do here at the museum.
Sure. I'm Jennifer Kilmer. I'm the director here at the Washington State History Museum.
Gwen, make sure you tell the folks who you are and what you do here.
Hi, I'm Gwen Whiting, and I'm the lead curator of the History Museum.
Well, both of you have such, I think your fingers really tied up into this amazing exhibit. Already hearing from so many people that have been able to come through here. It's really a representation of history, but a very particular history. Jennifer, I'll start with you here. Tell us a bit about how you guys came to say that this is what we're going to be doing here. We're going to make sure this exhibit is here. It has to be robust. There's probably a lot of planning that goes into this. Tell us a bit about that.
Sure. We actually plan our exhibitions about 3 years in advance, so this has been a long time coming. And, we knew the moment this came across our desk, we knew we wanted it. In fact, I think we were one of the first people to respond when they sent the email. It was that fast. Our mission here is to partner with our communities to explore how history connects us all. And the idea behind the Green Book of enabling freedom of movement, being able to travel with your family across the country, that's something that everyone can connect to, the freedom of the open road. And because they can connect to that, they can come into this exhibit and then connect to a history that maybe they didn't know much about. So we knew we wanted it. We're so glad it's here.
Well, I'm glad it's here too. I think it's always great to see exhibits like this in Washington State. Personally for me, it resonates with me. Obviously, this is, my ancestors. These are folks that really resemble this culture and history and legacy that I come from. So I really appreciate that you guys have said, that you guys were one of the first ones to raise your hand and say, wait, us over here, us over here. Gwen, tell us about this, because this is a large amount of pieces here to create the entire exhibit. I know we've talked before a bit about how you curated this and worked with others. Just tell us a little bit about how you were able to bring all these pieces together. And it really does, I think, tell a story as you go through the exhibit, which I know was intentional.
Yeah, this exhibition was actually put together based on the work of Candace Taylor, who wrote a really excellent book about the Green Book. And her book was taken by the Smithsonian, and they organized the bulk of the exhibition, then turned to us to put together these local components. And by local components, what I mean is that, we reached out to folks, various organizations, especially the Black Heritage Society, and other places that used to be Green Book sites, and individuals, to try to put together the story of the Green Book as it was in Washington State. Because, I think we talked about this before, there are some misconceptions about the Green Book being something that was, mostly used in the South or perhaps in the East, and less so in the West. But, we know that wasn't the case. Entire families were actually coming west, not just to vacation, but to move here. And the Green Book kind of provided that guide to their journey, both out here, but also, where could they settle when they got to the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah, that's important. I think people were, it's particularly in those days, there was so much careful planning because you didn't want to end up in the wrong neighborhood, right? And I feel the same. Even, I took my kids to, North Carolina. And, we did this thing where we're like, we're going to, fly in and then we're going to drive down to Myrtle Beach, which I was like, why did we do that? Because we ended up on a lot of these back roads. Our GPS was going down. We were trying to figure it out. And it was such an opportunity for me to be like, man, I'm experiencing what I think, some of our elders and, ancestors have experienced in terms of not really knowing where you are and wondering if it's a good area for you, if it's welcoming. So all of those things, I think, even play out to this day. today, but it was so stark then. And a lot of these pieces really exemplify that. Jennifer, as you, are the director here for this museum, tell us a bit about why it's important to ensure that there are exhibits like this that really showcase the wide varieties of cultures that we have here in this country, and particularly in this state. Tell us a bit about what that means to you here and for the museum.
Sure. You know, what it means to me is I think it's really important as the State History Museum to make sure that everyone who walks through this door feels like they belong and they are included. And the way that we do that in a lot of different ways, but one way is through our exhibitions. And folks need to see faces like theirs, their stories reflected back to them so that they understand that they play an important role in Washington state history. And, you know, stories like the Green Book, as you said, the relevance for our lives today is so enormous that we would be remiss if we were not telling these stories, right? Because this is how we grapple with what's happening now. And I really believe that history is what helps us determine how we move our path forward into the future, right? We have to understand our difficult histories. We have to be challenged by history in order to figure out how we deal with the challenges of today. We do that through exhibitions like this one, and really think about that every time we bring in stories. Is this an inclusive story? Will folks feel like this is a place where they belong and their history and their families and their communities are reflected?
Yeah, that's really important. I think, you know, we talk about this all the time, kind of in a generalistic sense, but it's so true when representation matters, particularly in space. Because I think one of the things that we deal with is, you know, some spaces feeling like, oh, I don't know if that's accessible to me. I don't know if I'm going to go there and see anything that's going to resonate with me or anything I'm going to enjoy. And that's a part of it. So I really appreciate hearing that and understanding that the museum really takes that lens and that approach with the way that you guys curate these exhibitions. You know, Gwen, when we talk about what it takes to pull all of this together, we also know that a lot of times these images are also can be emotional, right? They can pull on that kind of emotionality of that time. Tell us a bit about that as you were going through all of these different pieces. There's some literal like items here that also tell that story. Just tell us a bit about how that kind of emotionality came through for you as you like were able to step back and see this in its totality.
Well, one of the things that's really powerful for me personally about this exhibition is, you know, honestly, this would be an exhibition that would be really easy to tell from a place of victimization. Mm-hmm. And instead, what you see when you walk through this space is it's a place of strength and power and rising above. And so a lot of the images in the exhibit, there are these really painful moments that punctuate the exhibition, because that is the reality of travel in this day and age. And, you know, still, it's the reality. Yeah. But there's also these moments of incredible joy, mm-hmm. and claiming that joy and saying, you know, we are not going to let discrimination define us. And for me, that is extremely moving. And I know that when I was going through and looking at all the photographs that were available to us, you know, the Al Smith photographs and others that folks had brought forward, you know, I wanted to capture that joy as well, and to show, you know, people just enjoying their lives despite this Jim Crow era, because that in of itself is such an act of resistance and an act of resilience. And, you know, it's so powerful to come into an exhibition space and to see those messages as well. And I also think it's incredibly important.
It is. You know, that's one of the things that I think, you know, I was so appreciative of when I first saw Al Smith's collection. It was that it was pure joy, you know, leaping off of every photograph, right? And even in the midst of it, you understood, like, man, they were battling so many other social aspects that could have been looked at as, demeaning and all this derogatory and discriminatory. I mean, all of these terms that really kind of indicate more on the negative side. But what he was capturing in those moments were that resilience, was that strength. So I really appreciate you saying that. When I think about how you guys do work, Jennifer, I want you to talk to us about some of the logistics behind museums. I mean, you're talking about ensuring that people see themselves in the exhibitions, that, people feel welcome here. What are some of the ways that you guys are intentional to connect with the community? I mean, this is an iconic space right here in Tacoma, right?
Yeah.
Soon as you hop off of the freeway, you see this amazing building. Tell us a bit about how you guys stay connected so that community understands this is also a space for them.
We really focus on partnerships. And in anything that we do, one of the first questions that comes up is, who can we partner with on this? Because we know that, in many areas, we may not be the ones who know the most, right? And so we feel like connecting with these community partners is the first thing that we need to do. So for example, for this exhibition, we reached out to Stephanie Johnson Tolliver at the Black Heritage Society and, made that connection, connected with other folks in the community. Gwen does a great job of just reaching out to anyone and everyone that she knows to get feedback. And in doing that, we learn a lot, right? But we also, those folks can then spread the word, right, within their networks to say, hey, this is happening, and to come on in. We're also purposeful about where we advertise exhibitions, where we're putting up our posters and our pamphlets and things like that. We want to make sure that communities, everywhere within, certainly for the History Museum, within driving distance, know about what we're doing. And so we want to spread the word far and wide, basically. But I would say partnerships is just number one, because it brings in a lot of expertise, a lot of experience that we don't have. Gwen's amazing, but she doesn't know everything about everything. And so we talk to a lot of people.
I think that's so important too. Also, it opens up the opportunities, as you said, for folks to really spread it in their networks, which is key, right? Because had it not been for Stephanie Johnson Tolliver, I don't know that Converge would have known this was going on. So I really appreciate those partnerships and that you guys take that approach. Gwen, folks may wonder, how do you find yourself to become a curator, right? A lead curator at a museum. What does that look like in terms of some of the things you have to study and some of the ways that you have to be prepared for this kind of job?
That's a good question. Honestly, the path is different for everybody. I actually came to this path through education. So I started my work here as an education specialist, and then over time learned to curate. So a lot of the things that I do are really focused on that community work, because that's what I did as an educator. I was very concerned with, especially students in my work there, and it's always been really important to me that students who come to the museum see themselves everywhere. And, honestly, that's something that I wanted growing up, was to see my family represented, and I so often felt like they weren't. And so to have that opportunity to think about that in the context of every exhibition we're doing, we're sitting in the Green Book now, but, if we do an exhibition like one we're working on currently about the history of roller skating, I want to see everybody in that exhibit because, we all skate, right? And so looking for those opportunities to feature, to just think really broadly and to kind of cast the net wide, as it were, and just reach out to all kinds of folks. I do a lot of cold calling when I start doing exhibitions. I'll get on the phone and just call people and ask if they're involved, if they're interested in being involved, and then those partnerships kind of build from there. And we try to keep those partnerships and reach out to people, over and over for all the exhibits we're doing to see if they might have an interest or want to be engaged with it.
I'm just thinking about you calling somebody, do you skate?
Well, sometimes it happens
Hi,
like that.
Do you skate?
I kind of had that call with Stephanie, actually.
Yeah. So the calls can take on a wide variety of topics, clearly.
They can.
Clearly. Well, it's important that I think as we talk about this, right, that people are also able to kind of see some of the logistics and behind the veil. I mean, we can come here and see, this amazing exhibit or see different exhibitions you all do, but you were just talking about 3 years that it took to get to this point. I mean, tell us a bit about some of those pitfalls and high points throughout that 3-year process to get us to where we are today.
Yeah, well, and particularly with the pandemic, I mean, the pitfalls were pretty deep, right? I don't think we had to reschedule this exhibition, but we over the past 3 years, we've rescheduled a lot. We actually hosted another Smithsonian exhibition, Men of Change, which was about men who are change makers in the community who are African American. And that one, we had to close it 1 day early due to the pandemic. We were so lucky that we got the full run of that. But the life cycle of an exhibition is just really interesting. When we're developing them in-house, it's a lot of research, it's a lot of reaching out to develop that storyline. Then there's the component of how we visualize it, right? I think this exhibition is just beautiful in the way it has come to life. But some topics lend themselves to an exhibition, the nature of an exhibition, and others are a lot harder to bring to life in a physical sense. And so we do a lot of work on that. Funding is an issue. Got to find the funding for it. We're a state institution, but we also rely on donations, and so we're often working with donors as well during that time to figure out, what we can do, how fancy we can make it. There's a lot that goes into it. It's kind of it's almost like a stage production for theater, right? I mean, you're kind of putting all these elements together, and then you throw open the doors, and you hope people will come and see it and enjoy what you've done.
Well, I gotta say, as I'm, looking around here, there are different summaries too that kind of pop up. And so I see, we can see the level of thought and effort and planning that it takes to get to this point. But when you think about, how each piece kind of speaks to the next piece, how it connects to the next piece, tell us a bit about that, because I'm seeing these summaries. I mean, is that you writing them? Do you get someone else to write them? Did they come from somewhere else? I think oftentimes there's attribution there too, but how you find those pieces that are going to then connect to the items and the imagery that you have is probably all very intentional, I'm sure of this. So just tell us a bit about that.
Well, it's quite a process. For an exhibition like this one that did come to us from the Smithsonian, most of those texts came to us, but we did write the content that's related to the local section of the exhibition. And all of that sort of local content or the content that we do for in-house exhibitions, I frequently will draft that, but it comes after a lot of input from talking to people who were involved in historical events or whose families were involved or historians. And often those drafts themselves end up being kind of passed around through a couple folks in the community. And then, of course, all of this takes a great amount of design. And every piece that you see in the exhibition is very intentional as to where it is. We'll sit around and talk about, what will it mean if we put this object next to the other object? How does that change the story it's telling? And so we have to think really carefully about that. We think carefully about where the spaces are in the exhibit. Our Green Book exhibition has a very large open space in this very heart, in the center of the exhibit. And that was because we wanted you, at first when you go through the exhibition, to have sort of this narrow path, to have this sort of claustrophobic journey, and to get the sense of what it would be like traveling on that dark road. And then as you exit the beginning, you kind of come out and there's more space. And that gives you that moment, gives you that sense of freedom, but it also gives you the opportunity for contemplation before you go into the various regional parts of the exhibition. And additionally, it offers an opportunity for conversation because we have this big open space. And so that gives groups a chance to, kind of come and we have little movable stools and you can just sit in the center and just talk about what you're seeing and have these, discussions about, what does this mean to you personally? Do you have any family experiences? And we find that groups are, in fact, sometimes people come and sit and stay a while, and that's what we want to have.
Yeah, there's a lot of stories shared when people kind of gather in that middle. It's great.
Yeah.
I love that. I mean, I think back to my own kind of museum experience, and there's always this opportunity to, like, once it's kind of put together, let's get that feedback. Tell us a bit about you guys' process to connect with, community groups and different individuals, leaders in the community members, to provide that feedback of what they're getting when they go through the exhibit before it's made to the public.
Sure. I'll give you an example of another project that we're working on. We are redeveloping, Gwen and I are working on this, redeveloping a section of the Great Hall, which is our permanent gallery. And the section we're redeveloping will be focused on Native history and culture in Washington State. So we've put together an advisory committee of 8 folks from representing tribal nations from around the state who have an incredible knowledge and experience and background. We're working with, additionally, Todd Clark and Danica Starwood-Miller as our curators, who bring, again, incredible experience from tribal communities. So as we build that exhibition, we are regularly meeting with that advisory committee. Every step that we take, we sort of have meetings in between. We're sort of moving the ideas forward, and then we do a check-in with the advisory committee. Is this the right way? Is this the right path? We get the feedback back. And with each community that we work with, the feedback is different. I mean, for example, for this exhibition on Native history, one of the things that the group has said to us is, we don't want dead objects in cases. They want the culture to be alive, right? Other communities may say, it is really important that you put that object on display. Like, that object is really important to me. And so working with community and listening is really important. And we're really working to be better at it every day, right? We're not perfect, and certainly we have a history of not being perfect. I mean, let's be honest about it. So we're working harder every day to make sure that we're listening to more voices as we put these together.
Well, I'm glad you brought up that history, because that was something I wanted to touch on too. Historically, these spaces haven't always been open to everyone. And I think also, too, when we think about history in general, I mean, this is the Washington History Museum, but if you take a history course, oftentimes, it doesn't matter really what level, there's a lot of history that's not being told.
Yeah.
How are you, as a curator, a lead curator here, funneling that through as you think about what exhibits you're picking up, what you guys are going to do to ensure that you're kind of dismantling some of the untold history, right? Or bringing it to bear and kind of dismantling this white-centric narrative that we've experienced in this country with regard to history?
That's a big topic of conversation for us. We talk about it a lot, we think about it a lot, and it can be a challenge in part because some of the topics that we pick with this in mind don't always have the objects or easily discovered stories. Some topics, if you were to look at it through, like, as you said, this white-centric history or this lens, you could easily find the content for it. But we're trying to do more. We're trying to do better. And so a lot of that time is spent talking to the community, digging through files, looking at things that perhaps previous generations of curators might not have thought as consequential, like social media is a good example of this. One of the things that I often try to do is I try to figure out how to go where people live. Like, who are the people who are really affected by this topic, but where do they have their conversations? Because some folks, you got to go to a community meeting and talk to people. Other people are like, on Facebook or forums, or you get to get on the phone, or, every group has their own different way of communicating, and trying to, like, work with those folks and, make sure that they are comfortable with us being in that space, and to have those conversations as we start kind of digging deeper. And one of the things that we also have to do sometimes, which, you know, I think we're getting better at this, but museums traditionally have not been good at, is there are often exhibitions where we acknowledge that we don't have the full story, and the full story is no longer available. I mean, a good one would be an exhibition that we did a while ago on the history of McNeil Island Prison. And in that exhibition, we put quite a lot of effort into trying to find the stories of people who had been incarcerated, because that is a population who does not get to speak when it comes to prison narratives. And I was able to find that information sometimes, but their stories were so often suppressed, deliberately destroyed. You know, and there's a real stigma, you know, to leaving prison. Even though you've served your sentence, you know, you have still the society, the way that we have incarceration set up, people have to live with that forever. And so not all individuals wanted to speak. And so we had to think about the exhibition in a different way. Like, how could we tell the stories and be as honest and truthful as we could while still protecting anonymity for people who wanted it, which is something that we did. You know, we would use personal firsthand accounts, but we didn't always name the individual if the individual did not want to be named. And that's kind of counter to what historical societies do. You know, you're expected to name your sources, but we have to think differently if we want to invite marginalized people in, or people who might be personally impacted if those stories were to be made public, and yet offer them the opportunity to tell their stories if they want to.
And I think as well, we're learning to pay more attention to oral histories, because when we're talking about history that's deliberately been destroyed or suppressed, or no one recorded it because they didn't think that the voices of those individuals was important at the time, right? I think we find that there is a lot of oral history, right, that gets passed down through the generations, and we have to respect that. You know, sometimes that's the only way to get information about what really happened. That's just a trend that I think I've been seeing more and more in a lot of areas, and I think it's important, right? Because when you can't find that information any other way, and respecting the knowledge that communities have, right? Just because it's an oral history doesn't mean it isn't accurate or real, or that it didn't happen.
This is exactly why I think the topic of history, you know, I talked to my 16-year-old about it, and he's like, well, you know, Mom, you know, history is what it is. You know what I mean? He's just like, oh, blah, you know. He's doing good in the class, right? But it's just one of those things where he's not that driven to like, oh, man, this is really cool, right? And so I wonder what kind of things are kind of being done, you know, with spaces like this to kind of permeate that messaging of not just that like history is cool, but the importance of history. And I think exhibits like the Green Book really shine a light on that. I love hearing about some of these other exhibits you guys either have going on or did do before, because honestly, you know, if I would have known about, you know, this amazing men of color that you guys were, I would have definitely brought my sons here, right? So my question is how do you get the community to know about some of these great things you guys are doing? Because that seems like that's also a barrier in and of itself.
Yeah, it's really hard. I was just talking to someone about this morning, because we don't have a big advertising budget. Yeah. And people don't really read the newspaper anymore, right? So there's all of these, it's like we're bombarded with communication in this world, but getting anyone to pay attention to sort of one thing is really hard. So, you know, we work on social media, we work through these kind of personal networks, that kind of thing. It's hard to get the word out about an exhibition, absent, you know, the $1 million to put it on the bus as you as you drive through downtown. I wish we could get the word out more, because every once in a while, we will have an exhibition, and I'll think like, well, you know, we didn't get it out there because we didn't have the folks coming through. And then other times, you know, we're packed. So some of it is, I don't know, right? Like, I don't know how sometimes the word gets out and sometimes it doesn't. But all I can say is tell your friends, tweet about it. Do whatever you can. Tell your friends and neighbors.
Use the tools.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Use it. And I think that for us at Converge, that's why it's so important. And we really appreciate being in this space. We talked about this exhibit, Gwen, and now to be here and seeing it, I'm always just so impressed with what you were talking about earlier. It's a level of design of the entire exhibition for me that is like speaks so high volumes for me, right? Where I'm just like, man, there's something to be said about experiencing history in this way. And I was able to take my son to Mohai, and we went through some exhibits there, and he really had a different understanding of not just the importance of history, but seeing himself as a part of that history. And so I just thank both of you for the work you're doing. One of the things that we can do, at least now, is make sure, you look into that camera, Gwen, tell people how they can come down here and see the Green Book right now, right here at the Washington History Museum.
Well, make sure you come down to Tacoma. We're in downtown Tacoma. You can find out all about us, all about the exhibition, and about what other exhibits we have coming up and our programs at washingtonhistory.org.
WashingtonHistory.org. And what are the hours, Jennifer, that people can come down here? I know it's shut down on Monday, so we got a whole Converge thing happening today. Tell us a bit about the hours of operation so folks know when to come. And you guys are right on the bus line too, so it's accessible.
Yeah, we are right on the bus line here in downtown Tacoma. We're open from 10 to 5 Tuesday through Sunday. We have ticket prices, based on from adult to discounts for military and students. We have a lot of discounts for, we'll have Blue Star Museum starting on Memorial Day, so active duty military and their families can visit for free. Folks may be able to check out a free pass to come from their local library. So we try to make it so that nobody has any barriers to come visit the museum. Come down any day we're open, and you'll have a great experience.
You definitely will. Thank you guys for your work, and thank you for spending some time with me to shed some light on what it took to bring this exhibition to fruition. It is amazing. I can already tell just being here in the space and walking through it a bit. I can't wait to dive in more and in detail. Thank you both for your work, and thank you for allowing us to be here today.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for coming.
Absolutely. There it is right there, you guys. Jennifer and Gwen gave us the insight on what it took to bring the good book, the good Green Book, I should say, to fruition right here at the Washington History Museum. Make sure you guys come and check it out. I forgot to ask, when does it close?
June 15th,
Okay.
I believe. Is that right? June 12th. Sorry, it closes June 12th.
Okay, we had to get that in there.
Yeah.
Make sure we got that in there because I don't want people to come after and be like, but wait.
I know.
Thank you. So make sure you guys come and check it out before June 12th. It is a phenomenal exhibition. And honestly, when we talk about the importance of history, come and check it out outside of those history books. Get out to your local museums. Understand that they are spaces and places where history thrives. And, it looks like they're doing a real intentional job to ensure that they're being inclusive of what that history can look like. Thank y'all for watching.